Okay, let's do some footage for the episode. Just launch the game Vanilla and... Fuck, I slipped again. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Halls of eStory. For explanations on what this series is all about, I invite you to go and see my last video by clicking on the notification. Otherwise, let's get into the races of Skyrim. Now, before we begin this episode, let me be clear about something. We are now going to talk in a big majority about ethnic groups, or ethnicities, as in a category of people we identify with each other based on similarities such as common ancestral, language, social, cultural, or national experiences, as defined in the Oxford Dictionary and by James People in his Humanity and Introduction to Cultural Anthropology, which I didn't read myself, but seems pretty accurate and up to date. So what does it mean? Well, it means that the notion of race, if it makes sense in the world of Nairn, won't be used in our historical comparisons. So let's start, because we got 10 races to go through. Let's begin with the most common race in the world of Nairn, Imperials, or humans. They are, of course, other groups of humans, but every Elder Scrolls game categorizes them as a race rather than a faction. Though, if we want to be precise, two different ethnocultural groups are present in Cyrodiil: the Nibinians, that created the core of the empire, and the Colovians. Both these groups are descended from the Nidics and Syro-Nordic people that existed during the First Era. Throughout the four eras of the Elder Scrolls modern timeline, the Imperials have had a close resemblance to Romans. Yes, it seems a bit obvious, but let's get into depth. First, the physiology. The skin of the Imperial is, by default, slightly tanned, but not black or brown. This detail is important, and it points toward a Mediterranean origin. Furthermore, their hair and the concept art are black, another characteristic of people from the region. That was for the biology and physiology. Now, let's get into cultural details. The imperial governmental structure is very close to the late Roman Empire. The emperor is supposed to have all control, but he can be everywhere. So he sends legates in provinces to represent him and will justice for him. At the apex of his Septim Empire during the Third Era, the empire was covering the whole territory of Tamriel, plus some bits of Akavir, one of the other continents situated to the east of Tamriel. The situation in Skyrim, however, is more dicey and follows well the Roman Empire's history. Okay, I forgot to talk about the important point in the script, so let's do this again. From 235 to 284 AD, the Roman Empire was without an emperor. The Senate tried to regain power, multiple candidates to the imperial throne battled, and civil war threatened the entire empire, almost making it collapse if not for the intervention of Diocletian. This interregnum is one of the most famous in history, as it broke the entire empire in three parts with 26 claimants to the throne, and as a plague and economic depression raged throughout the territory. A similar situation happened at the start of the Fourth Era, 200 years before Skyrim. During 15 years, the throne was left without an emperor, and the Imperial Council fomented to get the power. It weakened greatly the empire. After 250 AD, the Roman Empire that was covering the greater part of Europe, the whole northern African coast, Syria, all the way up to the entry of the Caucasus. We even have traces of Roman expeditions that could have gone all the way to China, but no colonization. Started slowly, but surely losing territories, not only in wars and revolts, but simply in treaties. The Roman Empire gave Sicily to the Normans, they gave back their territories in Germany, and we have other stories such as these. The empire was reaching a state of decadency, a similar state as in Skyrim, even before losing against the Aldmeri Dominion in the White Gold Treaty. The Empire was in turmoil. After the Oblivion Crisis and the failed invasion by Marinus Dagon, Black Marsh, that had successfully pushed back the Oblivion forces, secedes from the Empire, and there is no force to stop them, as there is no Empire for 15 years. After that, Cyrodiil falls apart, and the Aldmeri Dominion, which gained a formidable influence, attacks the Empire, already controlling elsewhere the Khajiit country. Hammerfell also secedes, and suddenly Cyrodiil is left with not much, as we enter Skyrim's timeline and Ulfric Stormcloak decides to secede too. This is almost the exact same scenario as the Roman Empire. Now, based on the values of conquest and assimilation, imperials function like the ancient Romans. Rather than crushing opponents, they assimilate them, including Roman values and systems in the pre-existing society, and thus adapting too. That's what we can see in the game from Imperials in this Skyrim society. They are mostly part of the background, and you wouldn't notice, for example, Adriana Veneci is an Imperial on first sight, if you didn't consider her name is Italian, indicating also the transformation of the language from Latin to Italian, another sign of decay, or the fact that her skin is extremely tan for a Nord. She uses the same code, language, and has integrated into the system. Well, Vatel has long part of the Imperials, but don't worry, I have more on the other races. Before going through the different elven races, we're gonna finish the humans. Let's see what I can dig about the Red Guards. Red Guards are from Hammerfell. We have a few indications about the cultural origin of this faction, and it's more complex than what I thought at first. The region that corresponds to the Redguard culture is Northern Africa, and, with more importance, Turkey. To be more accurate, one period from Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. But let's do the same analysis as with the Imperials. First, the biology. The Redguards have a brown skin coloration, common in Northern Africa, but not in Sub-Saharan Africa. They also have dark, thick, often curly hair, and dark eyes, characteristics common to the general African and Middle Eastern areas. Now, it's culturally that we can differentiate the Red Guards. They live on the edge of the Alikir Desert, one, if not the biggest of the deserts of Tamriel. This desert can be compared to the Sahara Desert, that is bordering every northern African country. Their clothing is very representative of Arabic clothing in general, with a small, light turban that is opposed to the heavier versions used in Pakistan and India. The name Redguard comes from the faction of warriors that conquered the territory of Hammerfell, the Ragada. Now, that may be a long shot, but Ragada in Arabic means freely, and the Redguards are strong people, believing in their own freedom, as we can see when they created their kingdom, creating in a few weeks a space that was their own through warfare, and also when they fought off successfully the Aldmeri Dominion. Yokuda, the original island of the Redguards, means in Turkish absent, maybe a hint to the fact that it's sunk under a sea. They are also considered the best warriors in the entire Tamriel territory, assimilation that can be done with the Janissaries, a special troop of the Ottoman Empire that was infamous in the whole of Europe for the cold and brutal efficiency in combat. The Janissaries were a group of soldiers only constituted of Christian slaves, captured young and trained to be perfect. Their cohesion was supposedly incredible, and they were the best infantry units in Europe. Red Guards are in a way the same, with a very structured society and an incredible combat talent. The architecture of the Red Guard cities are very close to Arabic architecture, with high domes and grandiose building, and on the side, big tents for normal people. The weapon of predilection for the warriors of the Red Guards is the scimitar, a weapon used primarily in the Ottoman Empire as a weapon of cavalry, but that could also be used on foot as its lightweight allowed for longer fights. Of course, this scimitar was also used in variation by Persians, Polish, and Indian warriors, but they are not what we are looking for. A strong sense of religion exists in the Redguard society, with different beliefs but extremely strict, not an equivalent to Islam though. To conclude on them, the Redguards are culturally attached to the Islamic world in general, with influences both from countries like Morocco or Egypt to the Ottoman Empire. The next trace is going to get us more to the north, so get ready because we're going to talk about the Nords. I know, you thought I was going to talk about the Britons, as it makes sense, they are to the north of Amerfell. But the Britons are also half elves, and I will treat them in a second part, as this video is already getting long. Nords are commonly known to be similar to Vikings, and on most aspects you would be right. The Nords that came from Atmora were to Skyrim what the Vikings were to Ireland. Raiders and invaders that took the lands of their ancestors. The relationship between the Nords and their country is still as ambiguous and complex as what the Vikings had with the Irish. Vikings didn't just trade and plunder. They installed and developed urban centers around Ireland. Their motivations were, to this day, unclear and unknown, but it doesn't matter. We are now going to profile the Nords, the same as the others. First, a bit of biology. Nords are tall, white people with blonde hair. They have adapted to rigorous weathers and are more muscular and bigger than most of the races of Nirn. They descend from the Atmorians, people coming from an island at the northern pinnacle of the world, which location has been long lost. They are very strong psychologically and are always facing danger, more than likely due to the fact that they face for centuries harsh life conditions. All of these indicate an origin from the north of Europe, but it's in the culture that we can see a definite Viking and Irish ascendant. See, the culture of the Nords revolves around honor, family, and community. These values are more Irish than Vikings, as we know that most Irish people until the 12th century lived in small independent community named ringforts or rath. Until the arrival of the Vikings, the only information circulating around Ireland was transmitted either in wars or by scholars, mostly priests and poets. The Bard College in Skyrim isn't the best indication of this tendency, though, as it is highly doubted that there were actual schools for musicians. Such a way of life is really Irish, but other factors indicate definite Viking origins. The big cities around Skyrim are the equivalent of the coastal urban centers created by the Vikings. You can notice I'm not using the term of city, though, as it is really hard to determine the size of these human settlements, for a few reasons apart from plunders. Vikings and Irishmen were building mostly with wood, which is a problem because most of the structures of Skyrim are made of stone. In a flat country like Ireland, the usage of stone is hard, it's expensive. It was mostly used in castles, churches, and monasteries. The usage of stone walls was even later, around the 14th century. So cities like Whiterun aren't really accurate compared to Ireland, and don't even talk to me about Solitude or Windhelm, both total aberrations. In that regard, the most historically accurate building in Skyrim is Jorrvaskr, a typical Viking construction entirely in wood and made in appearance as the shape of a boat turned upside down. Interestingly, it's also the only building with a name that could be Norse. Yor means either beer or if you had a B, or sword if you had a H, and Vasker means brave or valiant. Remember too that your Vasker is a typical mead hole. The reference to beer would make perfect sense. After saying all of the above, though, Skyrim is an extremely mountainous region, which has never been the case of Ireland, indicating a scarce difference in resources. Furthermore, Nords have a big tendency to fight every time they can, as they want to hone their skills in combat as much as possible. This brings us to another nice indication that Skyrim and Ireland are one and the same: the governmental system of Skyrim. In this country there is 9 holds, each controlled by a jarl, a Norse Irish term meaning an earl or lord. The jarls of each hold are mostly independent, but swear fealty to the High King, who decides, for example, when the country goes to war. This is, in theory, and more accurately in tales, what was supposed to be Ireland before the arrival of the Normans. Local lords would obey regional kings, with 5 kingdoms: Ulster, Munster, Leinster, Connacht, and Meath. In Meath, though, is the Hill of Tara, one of, if not the most important cultural, historical, and mythical site in Ireland. In the tales, the King of Tara would be the High King, and he would manage the affairs of the entire kingdom. We have no proof that a High King ever existed, and there is a possibility that the story was invented after by the clan possessing Tara to give themselves more importance. So, no real historical accuracy, but definitely cultural accuracy from the people at Bethesda here. Finally, a bit of trivia that I indicated in my introduction episode. The Pale is the name of the region the Normans dominated from the 12th to the 16th century in Ireland, and the war between the Nords and the Empire in Skyrim can make us think about 2 periods of the Irish history. When the Normans attacked and invaded Ireland in the 12th century, effectively driving out most of the Vikings from the island, then the period of War of the Three Kings in 1639, the English Civil War, where the Irish kings united and tried to gain control of England and of their own territory against the young but powerful First British Empire. The Nords are the race the most developed in Skyrim, of course, and we could find tons of other analogies to Viking, Norse, and Irish culture, mostly everywhere in the game. You can find, for example, lots of names that are either from Norse or made to sound Norse. Let's not extend too much on them, though, as we have one last race on our list for today. As I told you, I won't talk about Bretons right now. I will, however, talk about one race that has a really important part in human culture. It's the Khajiit. The Khajiit, written Khajit for those who weren't sure, are, pretty hard to actually talk about. They are representative of something that we forget too often in our societies: nomadism. Only a small portion of the world population as we speak is still nomadic, but they still exist. I thought at first Khajiit were only Berber, as they have a lot in common with them, but they aren't just that. They represent most kinds of nomadisms, even Egyptians or Mongols. So let's get into it. Biologically, Khajiit are humanoid cats. I'm gonna cite directly from the wiki as they are pretty good at saying it themselves. Being based upon real life cats, they resemble them, and the range of facial features combinations enable them to have numerous and varied faces. Some resemble New World mountain cats, such as lynx, bobcats, and cougars, while others display features tantamount to those of Old World cat species, including tigers and leopards, and more yet resemble domestic cats. After this follows a more complete description of the customizations Khajiit put on their body, for example with earrings. This, of course, is a direct reference to the real world, but not to any ethnicity. To find out about it, we need to dive into the complex culture of the Khajiit. Culturally, Khajiit are almost the last people in learn to be nomads. The first nomads we can think about are the Berbers, the Mongols, and the Gypsies, because they still exist nowadays, and most of them are causing problems as they don't respect the borders of sedentary populations. Like the Berbers and the ancient Mongols, the Khajiit are neutral warriors not interested in anything else other than protecting themselves. They also are considered as one of the original inhabitants of Tamriel, a common point with the Berbers that have been occupying northwestern Africa since around 10,000 BC, and the Mongols, first noticed by Chinese classics during the 7th century BC. Their feline appearance makes them a particular target for discrimination. They are considered second-zone citizens in the empire and aren't trusted. Most people think Khajiit are thieves and cheats, a stereotype that is eased by the fact that their feline body gives them an affinity to stealth, a strong advantage in the game too, where you begin with +10 in sneak. The metaphor of the humanoid cat only serves this purpose better. Not only are they nomads, they also don't look like humans. An interesting fact lies in the name of their home, Elsewhere. It is pronounced like elsewhere, and gives a pretty nice image of what is home for a nomad. It's another place where they set up some semi permanent cities, yes, but still home is where they are. It is difficult to talk about architecture as we only have a few glimpses of elsewhere in the Elder Scrolls Online, and it seems pretty much like a fantasy architecture mixture of some other Asian architectures, so it doesn't really matter. In the end, Khajiit are for me a general representation of nomadism in sedentary societies. They thrive on a number of traits, don't concern themselves with legality. We could talk about the Montreal trade, that if cut correctly becomes skooma, an infamous narcotic very similar in effect to opium, and are constantly considered like shady people that can be trusted. Whoa, that's loads of information. I will do the other races in another episode of eStory, and I will try to make it shorter, but so many things are interesting to notice. Now, I will say that at the end of every video, but everything I'm saying is of course up to discussion, and if you want to tell me about your point of view in the comments, don't hesitate. That will be all for me, and I will see you next time in the halls of eStory.